Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Stories of Our Lives by Esta. I'm your host, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be back with you all after a bit of a break. We've got an amazing show lined up for you. Today, we're diving into the world of ships, and no, I don't mean the ones that sail on water. I'm talking about relationships, situationships, and all those complicated connections we find ourselves in. So, have you ever wondered if you're in a true relationship or just a situationship? Are you sure you're not being fooled by someone's carefully crafted persona? Maybe the person you think you're in a relationship with actually sees your ship as just a situationship. Or perhaps you're in that confusing limbo where you don't even have a label for what's going on between you and the other person. Not to worry, we've got you covered. We're going to dive into all of that today. By the end of this video, you'll have the answers to all these questions and so much more. Now, let's get started. Welcome back. But before we get into today's story, let's meet our guests. First, we have our in-house life coaches, Ava and Eva. They will help break down everything we need to know about spotting the difference between a committed relationship and a situationship. Welcome, ladies. Good to have you here.
Hello everyone, I'm Ava.
And I'm Eva. Hi, guys.
I also have two incredible guests joining us today, Dr. Jack, a renowned psychologist, and Helen Patrick, a relationship expert, both joining virtually from the comfort of their homes. And they will help us unpack today's story. Dr. Jack and Helen, welcome to my show.
Hello, Esta. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to discussing the psychological aspects of the story.
Hi Esta, I'm glad to be here. I hope I can provide some insights on the story.
Today we're going to tell the story of a young woman. She shared the journey of her one-year relationship with us. Let's take a look at her story.
A year ago, Sandy met a guy named Michael at the local grocery store. He was a dentist living in another city and had told her he was in town visiting his parents. They exchanged numbers and started talking on the phone. They shared 2 dates at a cafe on the high street. After a few days, he told her he was traveling back to resume his dental practice. They spoke on the phone every day and FaceTimed whenever they could, as the distance of over 6 hours between them made it difficult to see each other often. Michael told Sandy that he had enrolled in a medical course, which, combined with his job, made him even busier than before. Despite this, he always sent her good morning and good night messages every day and treated her like his girlfriend. He's different, Sandy would tell her friends. He remembers every little detail I share with him and even shows interest in my hobbies and activities. Sandy was head over heels for a man who lived hundreds of miles away. The distance, which should have been a red flag, instead became part of her love story. His daily text messages, late-night calls, and surprise flower deliveries made him look like the perfect boyfriend for Sandy, making Sandy assumed that she was in a serious relationship with Michael. After a few months, she began yearning for his physical presence. So, she decided to transfer her studies to a university about 20 minutes from where Michael said he lived. She thought moving there would create more opportunities to spend time with him. Her parents were shocked at her decision to move so far from home, but she insisted that the transfer was more about her education than her relationship with Michael, which wasn't entirely true. After she moved to the new university, Sandy noticed that the relationship didn't improve. Instead, it seemed to stagnate. She hardly saw Michael, as he was constantly making excuses, canceling their date plans, or leaving her hanging without explanation. Despite the warning signs, Sandy continued to defend him to her friends, convinced that he was simply busy with his dental practice. When she invited him to her parents' wedding anniversary dinner, she gave him more than 3 weeks' notice. He agreed to accompany her, but just a day before the trip he cancelled, explaining that he had already planned a camping trip with his friends and hadn't realized it clashed with her parents' anniversary. Sandy was deeply upset and ended up traveling alone to the dinner. Throughout the entire weekend, Michael neither called nor texted her, leaving Sandy to wonder why he hadn't reached out at all. Upon returning to school, she received a call from him. He claimed there had been no network where he went camping. As their conversation continued, he casually mentioned, "There's always the option to stop this if you want to." Those words sent chills down her spine, filling her with panic. All she could think was that Michael was trying to break up with her, and she couldn't fathom why. As Michael continued to ramble during their conversation, Sandy eventually asked him the dreaded question, "What are we?" His response, "I'm not sure," hit her hard. After several months of talking, he still couldn't commit to calling her his girlfriend. Then it dawned on Sandy that she had never met any of his family, friends, or even acquaintances. After the phone call with Michael, Sandy's mind was flooded with troubling questions. Am I wasting my time with this? Was I right to see it as a relationship? She felt completely lost and uncertain about what to do next. Despite having met a year ago, they still didn't spend much time together, and she was unsure how much longer she could wait for him. As time went on, Michael's excuses began to pile up. He would claim he was working weekends, dealing with emergency patients, or attending medical courses. Sandy would dress up and get excited about their date plans, only to face last-minute cancellations. Despite this, she continued to defend him, thinking, he's building his practice. These things happen. But each time she received a cancellation call, her face would fall, and she would try to hide her disappointment. "It's fine," she'd say, both to him and to herself. But it wasn't fine. After a few months of excuses and broken promises, Sandy realized that something was off, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. However, the truth unraveled for Sandy in the most unexpected way. One day, she decided to surprise Michael at his practice, armed with his favorite coffee and a determination to understand why he'd been so distant lately. As she walked into the medical complex where his office was located, she noticed a woman struggling with a stroller at the entrance. Being Sandy, she immediately held the door open. "Thank you so much," the woman said, wrestling with what appeared to be twins. The morning daycare run is always chaos, especially when Michael is away at his conferences. Sandy might have walked right past her, except the woman was wearing a necklace, a unique dental implant pendant that Sandy had once commented on in Michael's Instagram photos before he made his account private. He'd claimed it was a graduation gift from his mother. "Michael?" Sandy asked, her heart already knowing the answer. "Dr. Michael Norman," the woman smiled, adjusting the stroller. "I'm Lisa, his wife. Are you one of his patients?" In that moment, everything fell into place. The frequent trips to visit family were actually visits home to his wife and kids. The continuous medical course was just a convenient excuse to sustain his double life. The reason she had never met his friends, never been to his house during the day, and never been part of his real life became painfully clear. She wasn't the main woman. She was the other woman, unknowingly cast in a role she never agreed to play. When Sandy got home, she didn't cry or scream. She just sat on the couch, clutching her untouched coffee cup, and then she laughed, a hollow bitter sound that didn't suit her at all. She recalled how she used to think his text responses were slow on weekends. It turns out it's hard to text your girlfriend when you're having breakfast with your wife and kids. The funny thing is, she had spent so much time wondering if she was in a relationship or a situationship with Michael. In the end, it was neither. It was just a lie wrapped in really good morning texts. That day, she sent him one final message. "I met Lisa and the twins today. I hope the deception was worth it." Then, she blocked his number, deleted their photos, and erased all traces of their year-long relationship from her life. That was 6 months ago. Sandy is now stronger, wiser, and also more cautious. She shared her story so that other women can learn from the warning signs she missed and the red flags she optimistically painted pink.
This story left us with some tough questions, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of what went wrong in Sandy's relationship with Michael, let's first define a relationship and a situationship. Ava and Eva, tell us these definitions.
A relationship is the way in which two or more people, concepts, or objects are connected. It can refer to various types of connections, such as emotional, romantic, familial, or professional. For example, a relationship can be the bond between family members, the connection between friends, or a romantic partnership between two people.
On the other hand, a situationship is a romantic or sexual relationship that lacks formal commitment or clear boundaries. It's more than a friendship, but not quite a defined relationship. Situationships often involve elements of romance and intimacy without the labels, commitments, or obligations of a traditional relationship.
Now that we have the definitions out of the way, Dr. Jack, let's dive in. My first question for you is, why didn't Michael tell Sandy he was married with kids? Why did he lead her into this relationship with a lie?
From a psychological standpoint, Michael's behavior suggests a deep fear of conflict and potentially a lack of emotional maturity. He may have feared rejection if he told Sandy the truth up front. There's also the possibility that he didn't want to jeopardize the thrill of the situation, or the ego boost he got from being desired by two women. People like Michael, who led double lives, often have a distorted sense of their own worth or are trying to fill emotional gaps that exist in their primary relationship.
So, he essentially used the lie to keep his options open?
Exactly. The lie served as a way to control the narrative and maintain the illusion of being desirable and available. It's a manipulative tactic, but it's often driven by deep-seated fears of abandonment or inadequacy.
Dr. Jack, that's eye-opening. It's easy to think of people like Michael as just dishonest, but there's a deeper layer of fear and insecurity at play. Helen, let's hear your perspective. From a relationship coach's standpoint, why do you think Michael would go through such lengths to deceive Sandy? Why not just be upfront?
In my experience, some people don't even recognize that they're deceiving others. They rationalize their actions because they're trying to preserve their self-image or avoid facing their own moral shortcomings. Michael might have been juggling two lives for so long that he started believing the narrative he was telling himself. Some people in relationships like this see the affair as a reward for their frustrations, and they don't see the damage they're causing until it's too late.
So, Helen, do you think Michael truly believed he could maintain his deception long-term?
Yes, I do. Some people become so entangled in their own lies that they start living in a fantasy world. They tell themselves it's okay, that everything will work out, and in the process, they ignore the very real consequences for others.
Let's move on to our second question. Dr. Jack, how did Michael manage to deceive Sandy for so long? How did he keep up this illusion, especially since there were so many signs that something was off?
People like Michael are often very good at maintaining a sense of normalcy. They're charming, convincing, and able to manipulate small details to keep the illusion alive. With Sandy, it seems like he kept her emotionally engaged with constant communication, those daily good morning texts, the surprise gestures, and all of this built an emotional dependency. Sandy, by that point, had invested a lot emotionally, so she was more likely to dismiss or rationalize things that didn't make sense.
That sounds like emotional manipulation. He kept her hooked with small acts of kindness while avoiding any real commitments.
Yes, it is emotional manipulation. He kept her emotionally invested and distracted from the bigger picture, his lack of real involvement in her life. It's classic manipulation. It's not about one huge lie, it's a series of small, gradual misdirections that build over time.
What were the red flags in Sandy's relationship with Michael? Ava, talk to us on this.
The number one red flag for me was the distance. But I know sometimes these things work out. And I guess that's what Sandy thought too. At first, things actually looked pretty promising. His daily good morning texts, long phone calls and surprise flowers delivery. It felt really romantic. But those early stages can be so tricky. Because they can mimic a budding relationship, even when it's not. I agree that those gestures are nice and all. But it's not the whole picture. You need more than just fleeting moments of connection. It's like building a house on sand. There is no real foundation. You both need consistent effort, clear communication and a shared vision for the future. Physical presence and shared experiences also matter, especially early on. So, the distance thing is kind of a big deal in a relationship. Think about it. How can you really get to know someone, build trust, when you're hardly ever in the same place? Well, she ended up making a big move. She transferred to a university just 20 minutes from Michael's dental practice. And it seemed like things were finally falling into place. But that's when things got really weird. The excuses started piling up. Cancelled plans, last-minute changes. Michael was suddenly too busy. Right, it's like he was all in when it was long distance. But as soon as the distance got closer, he started pulling away. Like the distance was convenient for him. No commitment needed. That is a big red flag.
Eva, any other red flag?
Of course, I see 2 more red flags. I mean, it's easier to ignore red flags when you're really into someone. We've all been there. But for Sandy, the signs were glaring all along. Like, remember how Michael was always busy, canceling plans especially on weekends? He would always come up with some excuse. He even avoided attending her parents' anniversary dinner. And Sandy just accepted it, and even made excuses for it. And that's a common trap we can fall into. Especially at the start of a relationship. We downplay those inconsistencies. You want to believe the best in people. But inconsistency is a red flag. It means you're not a priority to them. Their actions don't match their words. So, if someone's always flaking on you, that's a sign. Even if they have a good reason. It could be a sign of something deeper. Especially if it's a pattern. And think about it this way. In a real relationship, you naturally want to bring your partner into your life, right? Meet your friends, your family, spend time together. Do stuff together, build a life. But Sandy and Michael didn't have that. It was like he kept her totally separate from his real life. And that's another huge red flag. Almost like you're being hidden. It's like living in 2 separate worlds. And you're only allowed to see one. That's a great way to put it.
That's such an eye-opener. There were certainly signs everywhere for Sandy. This question is for you, Helen. How did Michael manage to deceive Sandy for so long?
So, here is the catch. Remember when they first met, he was living 6 hours away. They started as long-distance relationship. They talked every single day. They were really consistent. Even up to his surprise flower deliveries. You know, he made Sandy feel warm and fuzzy. He was attentive. He remembered every detail of what she had told him. He just seems like the perfect boyfriend, despite the distance. Which is what actually allowed him to create this idealized image of himself to her without having to back it up with consistent in-person behavior. Sandy was blinded by Michael's seemingly perfect persona and the attention he showered upon her through texts, calls, and gifts. And here's where that expert communication comes in. Because Michael always so apologetic. And he's so good at it. He's very convincing. So Sandy keeps giving him the benefit of the doubt. What we're seeing here is like a classic example of what's called love bombing. It's a manipulation tactic, where someone overwhelms you with attention and affection in the early stages of a relationship. Creates this like intense bond. And it makes it so hard to see the inconsistencies in their behavior later on. It's like he's setting her up to accept his excuses as normal. He's establishing this pattern where his words are like incredibly loving and reassuring. But his actions don't quite match up. But because of that initial like love bombing phase, Sandy's more likely to dismiss those inconsistencies as just him being busy or stressed.
All right, let's move on to a critical part of Sandy's story, the turning point. Dr. Jack, what do you think was the moment that made Sandy finally see Michael for who he truly was?
The moment Sandy discovered Michael's wife and kids was the breaking point for her. It was the realization that all of Michael's excuses were just that, excuses. It was when the pieces of the puzzle came together. This was when she saw the full extent of the deception. In psychology, this is called a revelatory moment, where someone's beliefs are shattered, and they're forced to confront the truth. For Sandy, this moment was both traumatic and liberating. It shattered the illusion and forced her to reassess everything. It was almost like everything she had been questioning, those last-minute cancellations, the lack of deeper involvement, suddenly made sense. She'd been living in a fog, hoping things would get better, but this encounter pulled her out of it.
Helen, from a relationship coaching perspective, what does this reveal about how we often stay in situationships? What's happening emotionally when people are avoiding the truth for so long?
Emotionally, it's about denial and hope. Sandy wanted to believe Michael was the one, and it's very easy to hold on to hope when we feel emotionally invested. People tend to downplay red flags or rationalize bad behavior because they don't want to face the reality that the person they care about might not feel the same way. This often leads people into situationships, relationships that are based on emotional investments, but with no real commitment or clarity. It's easier to stay in that uncertainty, hoping that things will turn around, than to face the painful truth.
So, it's almost like we get trapped in our own hope and desire for a relationship, even when the other person is showing us something else entirely.
Exactly. Hope is a powerful force, but when it's based on illusions, it can keep us stuck for much longer than we should be.
Now that we've covered the turning point, let's shift to the key takeaways from Sandy's experience. How can someone tell if they're truly in a relationship or just stuck in a situationship? Dr. Jack, what are the signs to look out for?
Here are 3 key things to watch for. 1. A true relationship is marked by clarity and mutual commitment. If you're unsure about where you stand after a few months or years, then you might be in a situationship. It's important to have direct conversations about the future and the label of your relationship with the other party. 2. If you've never met their friends, family, or seen where they live, chances are, they're keeping you on the periphery of their life. Someone who truly values you will integrate you into their world, not keep you in a separate space. 3. If someone only reaches out when it's convenient for them, late-night texts, last-minute plans, it's a sign that they're not fully invested. Consistency in communication and effort is crucial for a healthy relationship.
Helen, what are the other takeaways from Sandy's experience?
The takeaway here is that in a healthy relationship, you would want to share your world with your partner. You're proud to introduce them to your family and friends. To make sure we're not settling for a situationship when we deserve a relationship. Ask yourself some honest questions. Do you feel seen and heard in this relationship? Does your partner value you, make you a priority? Do you feel like you're building a future together? Or just going through the motions? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, then it might be time to have a serious conversation. With yourself, first and foremost. And with your partner as well. Figure out what you really want, what you deserve. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from something that's not serving you. Make space for something better. I think that's something we can all take to heart.
Ava and Eva, any additional advice for our viewers?
Those are great points by Helen and Dr. Jack. In addition to those, here are some more signs to look out for. Lack of transparency. If there's always something they're hiding, whether it's their personal life, their plans, or their past, this is a major red flag. Real relationships are built on openness and trust. Emotional unavailability. If your partner is distant, doesn't share their feelings, or keeps avoiding tough conversations, it may be time to reconsider the situation. Relationships require emotional intimacy. Also pay attention to the pattern of excuses. If their actions don't align with their words, like consistently canceling plans, that's a sign they may not be as invested in you as you are in them.
One thing I noticed in this story is how Sandy defended Michael, even when the signs were there. She kept rationalizing his behavior, making excuses for him. These are things that happen in relationships. When we start making excuses for someone's behavior, it's often a big sign we're overlooking the truth. And another sign is when you're constantly questioning what you are. If you've been in a relationship for months and you're still asking, what are we? That's a huge red flag. Relationships should feel stable, not like a constant guessing game.
I think Sandy's experience highlights the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships, even when emotions are involved. As you navigate your own relationships, remember that actions speak louder than words. That perfect communication doesn't always equal a perfect relationship, and that you have the right to demand honesty, respect, and authenticity from those you choose to let into your life. Love should feel like a partnership, not a puzzle you have to solve. Focus on building relationships that nurture your self-worth and don't be afraid to set boundaries. And remember, your relationships should be built on trust, transparency, and mutual respect. However, if you're in a situationship, it's time to ask yourself the hard questions and decide if it's really worth your time. Finally, know your value and always trust your instincts. That's our show for today. Special thank you to our guests, Dr. Jack and Helen, and our in-studio analysts, Ava and Eva. That was quite an insightful discussion. And to everyone watching, thanks for watching and see you next time.